Imagine a world in which your country, or really the whole globe, has just come out of crisis and calamity. Survival seemed tenuous for you for a little while there. Manufacturing slowed way down, so now all of the goods that you and your family need are in short supply. And a bunch of systems that you used to depend on and understand have totally changed. You're now in a housing shortage because literally everything, including home building and manufacturing the supplies that you need for home building, was put on hold for a while there. I'm talking, of course, about the housing shortage of post-World War II America. Wait, you thought I was talking about this? No, I'm saving that can of worms for a completely different time. Today I'm going to walk you through the case study program, a rare and remarkable project that endeavored to showcase how new materials could be used to design elegant, functional, and replicable houses for the American middle class. The case study program was born from a need. It was less an exercise in showing off design and architecture, and more of a practical solution to a compounding problem, the housing crisis. See, when the project was first conceived, the US was coming out of some back-to-back setbacks. The first of those setbacks was the Great Depression, right? So just to give a quick snapshot of that time, home mortgage delinquency was in the 40 to 50% range, which is so high compared to 2009's 8% and COVID's 9%. Homelessness was a true crisis throughout the country. Informal, self-constructed encampments called Hoovervilles, after President Hoover, popped up all over the country. Eventually, President Roosevelt's New Deal would alleviate some of the housing crisis, but many Americans didn't meet the requirements set forth for the new federally subsidized housing, so it's not like this was a cure-all, and homelessness remained nationally unsolved. A few short years later, we find ourselves amidst World War II, which, guess what that did for housing, right? So manufacturing was basically halted for anything that was needed for domestic purposes, including home building, because all manufacturing needed to go directly or indirectly to the war cause. By the US Department of Housing and Urban Development's best estimates, it seemed like the US was short 3 to 5 million houses in 1945. And a lot of that was happening on the West Coast as population was booming out there. So we had lots of need for housing, ideally housing that could use materials that had been mass-produced in war, and we needed a practical solution. So meet John Intenza. John Intenza was the editor of Arts and Architecture magazine. In 1945, he published a big announcement in his February issue. He'd be taking this national housing shortage issue head on. Intenza would enlist the work of nationally known architects to study, plan, and design 8 experimental prototype houses. The spirit of the project really towed the line between idealism and utilitarianism. Like, Intenza really wanted to inspire architects with these designs, but he also wanted to make sure that he was making real change when it comes to the housing crisis. He expected that the program's designs and blueprints would be literally copied and used in tract housing everywhere across America. In his project announcement, Intenza wrote, "What a man has learned about himself in the last 5 years, war, will express itself in the way in which he will want to be housed in the future. Only one thing will stop him, and that's the tenacity with which man clings to old forms because he does not yet understand the new." Sharp words, but I think that he really meant them. Intenza's goals were lofty, but I think that he realized that he had a really unique chance to change what American houses could be. The case study houses themselves were meant to be aspirational yet minimal, kind of like the project. Each architect was to use low-cost materials from like commercial and industrial manufacturing to keep costs low to make sure that the houses could be replicated by middle-class Americans. So pen met paper, and Intenza designed a project to showcase new and expensive materials that had been developed during wartime, to showcase modernist design, and to say, with an exclamation point, that middle-class housing does not need to be ugly or unimaginative. This project was truly meant to be used as a public service. The announcement got immediate hype and attention, and although some elements of the project evolved throughout the process, for instance, like the program ended up being 36 designs instead of the originally planned for 8, and the cost of each house actually got more expensive as the project went on. The project is a big part of why modernist design as a movement has been so successful, and it's also a part of why we have this, and this, instead of this, and this. Take case study house number 1 as an example. The house was designed with efficiency and optimization in mind, which are modernist ideals. This is a big departure from the Queen Anne Gothic revival Victorian and Second Empire design styles. So like instead of big bolstery halls and ornamentation, dramatic, intricate design, this modernist house was hallwayless and very modular, prioritizing ease and maintenance rather than grandeur. When Julius Ralph Davidson was designing the place, the optimization of air, greenery, sunlight, these were all top of mind for him. He set the house back like 45 degrees rather than like the standard alignment of a house on a lot, so that the residents would be able to enjoy cooler temperatures and still enjoy plenty of sunlight. The house provided a full display of surrounding nature with massive windows complemented by continuous fluorescent lights, which again is such a departure from what American houses looked like before the war. In case study house number 2, designed by architects Sumner Spalding and John Rex, we see another departure from American norms. In this case, the incorporation of asphalt flooring, which, like that sounds crazy even for 2024 standards, would have been totally groundbreaking, no pun intended. Another notable feature in case study house number 2 is this wavy wall, which was form-breaking and again super experimental to have something like this in a middle-class, unassuming house, since it really breaks with like what the American conception of like a normal house would be at the time. I think it's really cool that none of the materials used in case study house 2 were expensive, but the design really showcases the beauty in the simplicity of the materials. Really sick house, especially when you remember that this house is literally being built in the 1940s. Although this next house was never built, like a few of the other designs in the case study program, case study house number 4, also known as the Greenbelt House, epitomizes a big focus in modernism, the changing of the status quo. The house's architect, Ralph Rapson, drew up a whole bunch of iterations of the house before landing on this modular design, which all centered around a green belt that ran through the center of the living space. Very fun, very cool, very avant-garde, but I will say, it makes sense to me that there wasn't a client in this case to put up money to actually build the house, because honestly, I don't even want to think about the gnat infestation that this green belt would cause, so maybe it's okay that this one in particular stayed in the drafts. Also, what is meant by this particular drawing that the architect drew? I honestly don't want to know. I'm okay with that being a private thought for him and not for me. Moving on. Case study house number 3 by Werner and Bernardi was a better execution of this indoor-outdoor lifestyle, and I would argue that the indoor-outdoor lifestyle marketing really popped off with this house. You have this particular H-shaped indoor-outdoor house to thank for a lot of modern Southern California indoor-outdoor style houses today. Wow, that was word salad, but you get it, you get it. Okay, this next house is a good one. So, like many other houses in the case study program, you can actually still tour this one. Case study house number 8, also known as the Eames House. Although architects Charles Eames and Eero Saarinen designed the original plan for this house, by the time that the industrial steel, glass, and asbestos were actually available to be delivered to the site, Charles Eames partnered up instead with his wife, Ray Eames, a prolific artist and designer. And you might recognize them as the original designers of this chair and also this chair. They overhauled the original design plan, which was bridge-like and set atop of the lot's meadow, in favor of this 2-story steel-framed reality. They did this for the nature. They wanted to enjoy the meadow and still have views of the ocean. So to do that, they needed to decrease the house's footprint and set it back towards the hills. This was so mindful of them to do. And actually, it really made sense for them because they ended up spending the rest of their lives there. And actually, right next to the program's creator, John Intenza. Remember this dude from up top? Eames and Saarinen designed Intenza's house too, but this one focused on interior spaces and views more than celebrating steel/the structure. I will say I find it odd and anxiety producing to imagine myself living like right next to my colleague and like kind of semi-boss, but I guess the two of them were pair bonded. They needed to live next to each other, so that they did. This is very twin flames behavior, but I digress. Intenza's house is really, really sick. And between the two twin houses, I'd for sure rather choose this one to live in. No shock to those of you who saw my vitriol towards stainless steel, but again, I digress. Let's skip ahead a few years and look at some of the last houses that came out of the case study program. Case study house number 21. When I tell you that I got the heebie-jeebies, I got the chills and literally said, "You little sickos," when I first saw images of this house, maybe you'll understand. What's the word for like overwhelming excitement from weirdo design? That's what this gives me. Pierre Koenig, the designer and architect of this house, man that you are. It's a moat house that uses water as a landscaping element to reflect the clean, crisp lines of the house and surrounding nature. It's an experiment in material science, using cutting-edge materials to block the sun and waterproof the house. It's a glass box that's completely free from overhangs, allowing the sunlight and views to pour into the house. This house is a piece of functional art. I will say it's with this house that I think that the scope of the case study program changed a little bit. Like, the earlier houses and the original design of the program has the middle class family's needs and the replicability of these designs as some of the main goals. And I think that we fall short a little bit here. But I'm okay with that because, again, I think that this one is a masterpiece, a true work of art, and I'm just glad that it got built. Honestly, even at my best attempt of design fan fiction, I couldn't even write something so magnificent and perfect. I don't write fan fiction. Moving on. I'm not alone in my enthusiasm because actually the next house, case study house number 22, this is the most famous house of all of the program, and that's the house that you've probably seen already. This is a house that even if you're not familiar with the program, you are familiar with this house because it's been in a bunch of movies and photo shoots, TV shows, etc. This house, also known as the Stall House, was built in 1960. The house is stunning with its simple and almost hypnotic lines, starkly minimalist steel frame design, and massive windows, emphasizing the cozy view. Again, for me, this one fails the replicability test because I think the whole thing hinges on having that view as part of the architecture almost. I can imagine this house just in the middle of tract housing, in the middle of America. It's just not as impressive. But that all being said, I do think that the affordability and accessibility of the materials used for this house actually does keep it almost more in line with the original goals of the case study program. There are so many case study houses that I want to cover and true feats of engineering, architecture, material science, design, etc., but I don't necessarily have time to talk about each one of them. The program lore goes deep. Hell, there were even 2 apartment complexes that were designed as a part of the program. And many, many more houses that, again, I can't devote just an infinite amount of time describing. So in the interest of time, I'll let these beauties speak for themselves. Wow, that was really nice. Looking through these case study house photos, I feel that I have to note that these houses were built primarily in the 40s and 50s. Not the 60s and 70s, not the 2020s, the 40s and 50s. And I think that's exceptional. This program is majorly influential, and you can see it. It's why rich people's houses look the way that they do. I mean, one look at the Cullens house, and you know, these people, vampires, have money. The simplicity of these designs requires exactness, precision, attention to detail, and I think it's those things that make this project, these houses, seem so attainable for the middle class by today's standards. But it shouldn't be that way. If I've learned anything from this project, it's that we don't have to accept the status quo. In Intenza's own words, we don't have to be like those who attempt to ride into the future, piggybacking on the status quo. We are the people alive right now. As weird as I just made that sound, we are the ones that get to decide how and in what ways to push back on the status quo, if we can, or if we want to ride a broken system into the future. The case study program was born from a need to revolutionize housing. Homelessness was high, materials had changed, and my God, time is a circle because we're right back there in such a similar situation. The case study house program was a private pursuit, but it wasn't a cash grab. The Arts and Architecture magazine made money for sure, especially as the program gained popularity. And for sure, the architects that were featured in the program also gained notoriety and I'm sure had a lot of business success because of that. But I think the program really worked because its intentions were pure. I know that's idealistic to say, but hear me out. Intenza wanted to use new materials, new ways of thinking, and he wanted all of his houses to be replicable. He wanted to benefit the public. Why can't we have the same type of project today? The rampant corporate greed that stands in our way today is definitely an obstacle, and a huge one at that, but I don't think that it's insurmountable, and I ultimately do think that we could have a program like this today that would in turn help the middle class. And in the US, it's definitely a pipe dream, but other countries have had publicly funded programs like this to help them develop housing that uses inexpensive materials, new designs, basically everything that this project was. We could have a project like that that's federally funded. Maybe not in the US. Cost-effective, quality, middle-class housing does not have to be ugly, and we don't have to settle for this. I'm not kidding. I swear this feels like a calling for me to tell the people about this program so that you also can ask for this program. Also, if you are like an architect, is there a program like this that you know about? Please, dear God, let me know. I beg. Additionally, I think that Intenza should be celebrated for what he brought to us, and I think that the modernist design that Intenza helped popularize is one of the great designs that our civilization will leave behind. As corny as that sounds. Is that too dramatic? I genuinely can't tell. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I hope that you liked the topic. I hope that you spread this message to other people and tell them about the Case Study House program so that we can get something like that. Please, again, I beg. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye. But it wasn't a cash grab. Delete all that.